Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our weekly conclave. This week is the Hero's Dose, where we dive into different dynamic topics, with tonight's topic being intimacy and psychedelics and the intersection of the energies contained within. So, um, thank you so much for joining, and we look forward to an amazing conversation. My say co-host partner Cynthia is going to take over and sort of explain to you what we're going to be talking about and leading the way.
Hey everyone, I was just checking the sound to make sure we're good. And we are. Yippee. Thank you, Ben, for doing the intro. Yes, today we are talking about intimacy and psychedelics and kind of how they merge together in a sort. Before diving in, I just want to announce a few things. This weekend, we have a light wand ceremony that will be happening Sunday morning. There will be information that you can find on our website, thesacredsynthesis.com. If you go to the events tab, you'll see Light Wand Ceremony. We would love for you to join us virtually. And we have a few seats left for the in-person. So if you want to check out that page and see about joining us, we would love to have you. So today is what I hope will be the beginning of several conversations on these two topics. We were at MAPS last month and sat in a few panels, and there was one that was talking about sex and intimacy. And I felt as if the conversation was okay, but it didn't really dive in deeper. And I am a somatic sexologist and intimacy coach, as well as a ceremonialist here at the Sacred Synthesis. So this is a really fun intersection to talk about. And sexual intimacy is kind of taboo, along with psychedelics being a bit taboo in some spaces these days. So I want to say that while we will be talking about sexual intimacy tonight, we will not just be talking about that definition. We will also be talking about like the familiar, the closeness and connection that comes when we have intimacy. So just know that we are going to be talking more broadly speaking, and then towards the end, diving into some sexual components that can come when working with psychedelic medicine. So yeah, super happy to be talking about that. So what is the definition officially? So relational intimacy, like familiar, closeness, emotional resonance, that's what we feel with ourselves and we feel with others. And I am of the belief that true intimacy ultimately begins with ourselves. And we can have an intimate relationship with objects. We can have an intimate relationship with energetic beings, and then of course with physical beings in front of us, animals, plants, home, etc. Anything that we feel like we have a emotional resonance with, you have some sort of intimate connection with. And then sexual intimacy is more so physical arousal, erotic presence, and sensual play. As we know, psychedelics can really dissolve the ego and have boundaries melt away. And if used in any type of space to build intimacy, it can bring in more beautiful connections because our walls tend to be less up. And when applied in a sexual, intimate way, it really enhances sensation and can lead to a really pleasurable time if we're adding in some sort of tactile experience. So that's my introduction to the talk. Ben, do you have anything to add at this moment?
Yeah, thank you, Cynthia. I'll just add that while we dive into some different aspects of how these medicines can work with our bodies to increase and create different textural sensations, also softening how we see the world, just remember that um, things as they come through ourselves and our experience can project outward. So just always when you're approaching psychedelics and intimacy in a way that, sorry, my kitty's uh, all over me. He's very intimate today. Uh,
Perfect.
Yeah, perfect segue. So, just more saying that, just allowing yourself to do these discoveries, as we move through this with yourself, before venturing into doing it with others. I'm sure we're going to get into more of that now. Just sort of what started to come through for me as we begin. So,
Oh, I really love that. So talking about even with different psychedelics that you might be working with, building an intimate relationship with those medicines can really lead to profound experiences, as well as once you or if you decide to ingest psychedelics in a container with another person or persons, then you already have this familiarity, this connection with the sacrament. Simultaneously, hopefully you have some resonance with that other person that you've chosen to go on a journey with. So there's going to be all these layered experiences associated with having intimate, trusting connection. So the kind of touching about the the good and the bad here. So intimacy regulates the nervous system, especially when we're with someone else. We can co-regulate. It helps us build trust and attunement and vulnerability. And in sex, we know we get oxytocin release, as well as like pleasure and bonding that comes from that physical connection. And psychedelics are going to be enhancing self-awareness when possible. Like I said, dissolving defense structures, and also can be relieving subconscious blocks to like love and connection. So if you're kind of hardened to your partner or to someone else, as we know, certain medicines can help soften those edges. So you might be able to have a more intimate connection. And unfortunately, and I've experienced pretty much everything we're talking about tonight, I've experienced on some level. But the shadow side of like intimacy sometimes, or trying to discover an intimate connection, is trauma bonding can be mistaken for connection. And codependency can lead to merging. So you don't know where you end and the other person begins. And then some people really fake intimacy to avoid being abandoned. Telling myself I have experienced all of that in a myriad of relationships in my life. And it was actually through psychedelics and other energy work and therapies that helped me break free of those things. So I'm really happy about that. And then there can be some psychedelic pitfalls, which is some people use them to for escapism, or going into a higher or different altered state to, in my opinion, escape reality, and maybe bypass some embodied healing. And also in intimate connection, specifically in sexual connection, there can be mismatched intention, which can lead to re-traumatization. Thankfully, that's not something that has occurred to me personally. I have a couple of dear friends where certain medicines were used to manipulate them. So this all leads to, and actually I want to come back to you, or come to you, Ben, in just a
yeah,
second, but I share all of this because this is why it's important for us to first get deeply intimate with ourselves. That way we don't self-abandon. We can connect with someone who we know has aligned intentions, have those difficult conversations, and that are actually the best thing for us before we go into a container with someone under medicine. And I think that's really a helpful thing that helps reduce our exposure to potential harm. So those are my thoughts on these topics.
yeah,
Curious, Bren, your
yeah. Just
perspective.
add, and really to add to where you're going. Feeling into the connection with another individual as we sort of move from this the self to with others,
Mm.
um, connecting with your partner or your friends or family in a sober state first, and to establish some sort of familiarity, some connection, prior to working with psychedelics, especially as in a connection, right? Because oftentimes the medicine can mask what's going on and sort of create this like deep empathetic state, which is wonderful to experience, but it's not your lived state. It's not your waking state all the time. It can be something we can move into, but if you don't if you have things that are sticky that you're working on, oftentimes not necessarily in a state of awareness, but the consciousness seems to project itself outward. And so when that happens, we can, as you were saying earlier, like trauma bonding, like becoming this like unified force beyond the self. But if we've bypassed the things that we need to work on in our own individual experience, what that's going to do is create weight in the other, in your partner. And so it's important to first align with self and discover the, the sensations of life for yourself, right? So like, what does it look like? How does life feel to you? What are you doing the things in your life, in your daily life, that you enjoy? Are you bringing in things that are meaningful and fulfilling to yourself? And that those practices can lead to the deeper connection that we're seeking with our partner, right? Because we have to obviously connect with ourselves and our intentions. If we come home from work and we're stressed, we don't have anything of value in our life, and then we're like trying to find pleasure in our experience, it may be hard. So typically people in the current world bypass all these things to get to this dopamine experience, which is a pornographized perspective of life. It's all exploitive, and it's I guess an extreme example, but so if we dial all those things back and we go back beyond the escapism and back into like allowing ourselves to feel the textures of what's going on, what's happening, whether it's suffering or pleasure or exuberance, we can start to become aligned with our deeper intentions, and that allows us to connect more deeply with our partner. And so, just more bringing that into the conversation, I think it's vital for all of us to continue to work with that, because of course life comes at us all the time. So always, readjusting and reconnecting and staying in connection with yourself is vital.
Yeah, I love that. I love that so much. Thank you, Ben. I love what you were talking about, the dopamine chasing.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
it can be.
Yeah, most definitely. So let's first, if you're ready to go there, talk about self-intimacy and the use of psychedelics in that space. And let's first talk self-intimacy from the perspective of a non-sexual lens. So, okay,
Yeah,
yeah. So,
let's go.
yeah, let's go. Yeah, so there's so many amazing tools out there to assist each of us to dive into the pool that is ourselves. There's so much outward exploration we can do, but I think going inward is a really fun journey that seems to be never ending, and we continue to discover ourselves and reemerge in this newer understanding of like, oh, here I am, here I am, here I am. And I've really appreciated how psychedelics have allowed that to occur for me. So, with sacraments, I don't know what everyone who's watching this is working with, but the ones that have been most helpful for me over a long period of time has predominantly been psilocybin, and then pops of different things. And then most recently working with silomethoxin, one of our sacraments, which I find to be quite interesting and I'm enjoying it a lot. But what this self-reflection is allowing is for me to remove layers of things that are no longer mine, projected thoughts, patternings that we were brought up with. None of this is really novel in my share, but what is important is as we continue to explore ourselves and we see things that are brought to the forefront, usually through psychedelics, like you can't hide, they really appear, and if you try to resist them, they kind of get bigger and louder in some sense. It's really hard if you don't surrender. So if you can surrender into what's being shown to you, accept it, usually these things melt away in some sort. And that allows what I believe is like the true self, the highest self, to start to come forward more and more and more. So we're not living in this projected experience, but more, if we're all lucky, especially if you're working with 5-MeO, as Ben can attest, like you're coming into a more unified self, the higher self, like the big self, rather than these fragmented versions. So with that, you can start to really own what you like, what you don't like, what um, what you want, and live in a container of self-intimacy. Like you have this deep friendship with yourself. And I don't think it's trite to say, we should love ourselves first, and because then we can emerge with a cup full and we can actually love people from this state of, hey, this is who I am. And if we can accept that some might not be in alignment with us, then we can then allow for others to come into a closer connection who are in that vibrational resonance with us. And that's how self-intimacy can really help. And then if we are able to speak from a place of attunement with the self, so that means you're able to map what's happening in your body, map what's happening in your thought process, feel your energetic space, the subtle body, and know what's happening there. You can speak from that place of self-awareness, that attunement, and then start to connect and attune with someone else. And there's some really cool tools that you can use. One is mapping. So we can start with the body first. One is body scanning. Many of you have probably done this before, but you just lay in Shavasana, like lay on your back, arms splayed out and palms up, and start to scan your body from the tips of your toes all the way up to the top of your head. And you can scan the front of the body and then the back of the body, or in whatever type of pattern you want, but try to acknowledge every single piece of your body that you can. Some people like to go with joints like bones, or maybe just like name spots, like now I'm at my shins. But can you feel where like your left knee is, for instance? And that starts to bring you into a state of awareness of your physical body. You might feel some blocks where there's like no sensation, and that might be like an energy block, a density that's there. And you just notice it, right? So that's helping you create self-attunement, self-awareness within your own being. If you want to go a step further, you can do pleasure mapping. And this can be erotically sexual, or it can just be just erotic, just sensual, where you might just use your hands and start to just touch on your body. Just touch your body and try different types of feel. Like you can squeeze your arm, you can tickle, you can tap, you can scratch a little bit, and just explore your whole body really slowly and get attuned to what type of sensation feels good where. And again, this is just bringing you to a higher level of attunement and pleasure mapping, which you can then use as you step forward. And then lastly, what I think is extremely important, and I touched on it earlier, but is your communication. Are you able to honestly communicate with yourself? That's step one. Can you really acknowledge the I'll say reality of what's happening in your life? Not some projected future or remembered past, but really look at where you're at and have that inner dialogue with yourself and bring it into a loving state. Again, if you have the confidence in yourself and this connection with self, you're more likely going to then be able to communicate truthfully and lovingly with others around you. And let's remember that truth isn't always easy to say, but you can always say something with love. And that doesn't mean it's going to be received necessarily in a loving way, but you can always know that you've stepped forward with your heart open, expressed the truth of something in your experience, and offered for the other to be receptive in that. So that's sort of my take on self-intimacy in a very encapsulated portion. I definitely want to touch on this in a bigger way in the future. But Ben, just tossing it over to you to get your perspective.
Oh yeah, I mean, you covered quite a bit. Thank you. I'll just maybe add that in the mapping of sensation, it's not just relegated to our own utilities like our fingers. We can use other elements like heat or cold, ice, fire. Obviously, don't burn yourself, but maybe get close. Right? You are a capable adult, so you're able to ride the edge, and really, in the edge is where uh, things get really interesting. Right? We've been so desensitized and bringing everything to center. Right? Yeah, there's this idea that we're supposed to be balanced. Like, oh, Zen is the way. And really, the experience is designed in a way that how do we get to exuberance, like this outer layer, this outer way? And I really love what you said earlier around self and selflessness. And I'll say that um, one of the there's a person that I follow deeply, and he says, and I um, he says, this is Sadhguru. He says there's something there, a conversation around selflessness and selfishness, and it's like, well, what's selflessness? If you have no self, then what are you doing, right? And selfish doesn't mean that uh, you're not a present person for others. It just means ish, right? You are attuning to yourself, and that's perfectly okay. Uh, Beyond that, I think it's recommended. Like as we're saying, tuning to yourself is what is the intention of life in the beginning of it. So using these different elements to really check yourself out and connect with the edges and connect with this expanded state, um, alone first, and realizing that just like some of us have some shame around plant medicines and using them for whatever purposes we're using them for. Um, Self pleasure, intimacy, self connection is this sort of this taboo thing that society has been speaking about for so long, right? You know, like in America, we have this strange perspective where we love violence and all these different, you know, all these different movies with shock and awe, but sexuality and connection is a taboo topic. So, really leaning into the shift in the perspective of like, what if we invite all these experiences in and allow ourselves to actually experience them and experience the pleasures of life daily, regularly? What can we do with that energy that we're creating, right? What can we do with that creative life force that's within us? That's really the essence of all of this as a story, right? We can just be simple, like we want to do like Catholic sex, just get together just to make a baby, and then we can go on about our ways drinking. Great, let's have a day. But I think there's so much more to it, right? There's so much more beauty when you create this like, ooh, like a vortex of energy, of connection, you know, and bringing this all together in like a swirl of energy. And then you can embody that with yourself and share with your partner, especially. So like creates such as an enjoyable connection. Um, I think I'm going on a tangent now, but
Oh, you
anyway,
you went great. You went great.
yeah,
So I love it.
yeah,
Something that you spoke about is the desensitization or the categorizing of and compartmentalizing of certain aspects, right? So psychedelics are one of those things that have been extracted
right,
and made illegal in so many places when they've been used for so long. And then sexuality has been a tool that has been used to manipulate, control people. And we are seeing the effects of the way in which people's sexuality being controlled has created great harm. So
yeah,
as people, in my opinion, begin to emerge, to wake up to the higher truths, the deeper truths of themselves, they're realizing they don't want to be imprisoned in any way. And there's so much shame wrapped around uh, sexual pleasure,
yeah,
intimate connections, right? Whether it's with self or with other people in regards to desires, etc. And I am on a mission to help people de-shamify so that you can be fully liberated because the Catholic, you poked fun at the Catholics, but like Catholic guilt is not the only form of shame that's out there, right? There's
right,
so much, and it's really overt in some places. And I believe that if there's anything we want to hide, then there's shame attached to it. And that
sure,
doesn't mean you have to be out in the open doing certain things. But if you feel this compulsion to hide it, and there's like, oh, if somebody found out, there would be like this, like it would knock you off balance. Well, there's some shame there. So that's where I think psychedelics are so great, is because if you have shame about something, at least in my experience, it'll show you.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's gonna help you move right
Yeah.
through it. And you know, I think it's almost interesting because it's like it's a similar energy, right? Sexual energy, psychedelic experience. It elucidates this like expanded state, this creative
Yes.
expanded state, right? And so you can see why there's a censorship around it, right? Because it creates this idea that we can be more than we are.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. I'm not glitching out, friends. I'm just thinking about something that that I had asked Ben in one of our like more so like at the beginning of us knowing each other. It was a conversation we were having dinner, and I asked Ben, I'm like, do you think that there's space for psychedelics to be used in a container where people are allowed to, if they feel called, to be expressive in their sexual energy? And because I believe that so many of us are very contained, especially in certain circles. And I understand why some circles are designed, most circles are designed the way that they are. But I have this belief that we are still cutting people off who are going into the expanded states under psychedelics. And then if this other immersion of erotic energy comes through, which is creative life force energy, and we're making it overtly sexual when it could just be pleasure sounds, right? So I think there's a space for that to happen in the future. And this comes back into self-intimacy, right? Like if you know yourself, and you can trust yourself, and you can have conversations sober, knowing you're going into a container that this is allowed of some sort. And I say this meaning this is very broad, like sexual energy, creative life force energy is allowed to be present. Like I have a deep fear of being in ayahuasca ceremony and being in an orgasmic state the entire time and being removed from the room, right? Like that would
Mhm.
cause shame in me. Or one
Yeah.
time at another ayahuasca retreat, I was being shaken by the spiritual guides, and they kept telling me to go outside and to get naked. And I was like, no, 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 I can't do that. That's like, one, I can't leave the circle. Two, like get naked in front of people. I can't do that. And finally, I just gave in. I was like, okay, if this is what I need to do. And I went outside and I had an anointment of sorts that was a very powerful reinitiation into a lineage that I had forgotten about. Um, but I had the experience of a beautiful woman coming outside with a blanket to cover me up. And I needed to be in the sun. Like that was a part of the anointing, right? And I went through this shame spiral within a medicine circle. And I'm kind of going on this story here to come back and ask you the question, sort of, Ben. But it's like, how can we go into ceremonial spaces and remove this control of people's expression, control of their divine right to be naked if they need to be? And I think what we landed on was, right now it's safest and best for people to just have those experiences in a private ceremony, if that's what's going to emerge, so it can just emerge and there's no one else being impacted. So they're not being disruptive, or
Yeah.
doing it in a container with people who they love and trust and who are okay with that, and they can have that consent conversation of like whatever people need to do in this space they can do. So kind of bringing
Yeah.
this
Well,
back
I think
into this conversation, what do you think? Yeah.
yeah. Well, no, totally. What's ringing in bells in my head right now is this idea, because what we're doing in a container is like really safeguarding it for everyone, but is that to the highest and best for everyone, or is
Mm,
that another form of censorship where we're like afraid that someone may get excited or whatever it is? So I think what we're looking at is a relationship from ourselves to the body, to the naked body, you know,
yeah.
because of the pornographized perspectives of life that we most people have been experiencing through movies, through TV, through pornography, through stories, whatever it is. It's like takes away the spaciousness for just existing and the textures of just being a person. Everything's over sexualized. So what happens when someone sees a body? There's this assumption that they need to have sex, or they need that's what they're preparing for, instead of they're just being free. And so when you work with medicines, especially 5-MeO, but many other psychedelics, it can create this desire on the body to completely disrobe, like get everything off of me. I want to feel the air and feel just freedom. And I have a tendency to lean that direction as well. Like I want to have everything as loose and as light as possible, because it's nourishing to feel the connection to actual space. We have so much stuff. We're wearing clothes right now, right? So it just creates stimulation on the skin, and a psychedelic expanded state. There's the energy body wants to expand, but when there's physical sensations happening that are they can tend to like hold things in. And so I'll also say that many indigenous ways to go through medicine is naked. Like everyone just disrobes, and then they go through these experiences where perhaps in the beginning there can be like the sexualization, because people come from different places and like, ooh, there's a beautiful woman or an attractive man, so there can be those sensations. But as you go through ceremony or multiple ceremonies, those experiences soften and those become brothers and sisters. Sometimes more. Sometimes they can, who knows? But I say that to say that how people arrive and how people leave are completely different. And so I'm always in the mind of asking how are things going to look when we leave here, and that's really my interest in creating containers, is creating expanded states and spaces for people, so we're able to actually transcend some of the shame, some of the quote unquote guilt that we have around ourselves and our
Mm.
other and how we feel about others, and arousal and connection, eroticism, all that stuff. I think it all is this comes to the same thing. It's like we've been trained to shame things that are exposed, right, and are shown, are seen, because it's just the nature of the system. There's no other reason for it. Maybe there's this fear that we can inspire kids. This is why you can't go pee in the bushes down the street. It's like indecent exposure. Like, but what does that even mean? Like, I'm an animal. If I go pee, isn't harming anyone, but because the system has created sexual perspectives only with genitalia, when it's exposed, that's what's happening to people. So when people build these containers out in their minds, they're like, oh, we have to protect everyone, so we have to make all these rules. And really, what the rules are doing is creating more of the same, more recidivism in the same energy. So I'd like to think about, like, how can we expand that? How can we
Yeah.
shift
Yeah, there's so much nuance. Oh, something just happened. There's so much nuance to all of this, right? And I don't think there's one specific formula that's right for absolutely everyone.
that?
And I do believe it's up to us and being our own um, journeyers. Like what I said to you, Ben, the week of maps, I said, I'm a sexonaut and you're a psychonaut.
Right.
Like I'm using my erotic energy, erotic exploration, and I mean erotic as far as like creative life. Everything in life is erotic. Everything wants to merge and blossom and like go and just create more and more and more. And that's what's
Hmm.
happening. Like we all of all of everything has this desire to merge. And I was
That's right.
speaking the other day to you, Ben, when we were preparing for this chat, and I was talking about how think about bees or wasps, like they have stingers, right? And they're like merging with the flowers of sorts. They're penetrating the flowers
Penetrating
and
them. Yep.
pollinating, and the flowers have made themselves like really open and beautiful and delicious and enticing in some way. And even some flowers have made their inner, I don't know if it's the stem, I forget what they're called, but to look like uh, particular like females of an insect, right? To like
Yep.
bring in pollinators. So
Yep.
everything is trying to merge in some way. And where I've kind of landed is like we're society at large is just not ready, but is getting there and accepting erotic energy coming out of us and just being in it and not being so um charged up by and just the sexual way, but in the entirety of like being totally aroused in life. That's happening for many people, and it's women who are waking up to that energy more so than men. And it's in my belief that as women continue to emerge and awaken their Shakti Kundalini energy and release shame and can speak their truth and their desires and stand in that honesty, I believe, and that's sort of something you see too in ceremonies. Like many times it's a female who goes into erotic ecstasy rather than men. Men tend to hold their energy a little bit tighter, but we're merging, right? Like we are just like, psh, here we are. So I believe as the feminine awakens to that, we are going to be, and we are actually inviting the masculine in, looking at the feminine and looking at merging in a totally different way. And I'm not here to preach like sacred sexuality and sex and pleasure only needs to be experienced in one way. But I think that's where we're headed.
Yeah,
And
well, I think to your point too, if I may just jump in here,
yeah.
just to add, as you go down this vein of like the feminine, like calling in the feminines, like the having safe masculine is very important. So I'll just bring in that like perspective for us men to have a safe embodiment where when there's an attractive person, we're not just on the hunt, right,
Yeah.
as so to speak, because of the perspective, right? So how can we show up? How can we show up for our counterparts or for ourselves, really, like in the beginning, to enable the feminine to come forward, to stand in her own power, without this like idea that
Mhm.
they're going to be um, uh, yeah, chased unless they
Hunted.
want to put the breadcrumbs out, right?
Sure.
And
Yeah. Well, and let's just, I think we all need to acknowledge that some people don't have sexual desire, and that's not uncommon, but a lot of us, most of us, have sexual desire. And if we can acknowledge that simple truth, we can then move on to the next phase. And to share another personal story, going back to the ayahuasca ceremony where I took my clothes off, and I was very resistant. I mean, they were like girlfriends and wives in the space. There was men there. It wasn't just women. I didn't want to like offend anyone or like create a ripple in the container because I became naked. But ultimately, I had to choose what divinity, the medicine was telling me to do and go into this initiation. And I even went out to the balcony, like went as far away from the window as possible and stayed on the porch, like we were told if we went outside, and got this like little sliver of sunshine. So I was even under the medicine, still very conscious of the group. And but when I went back inside and I was experiencing all of that shame, I started to become freed from that in the sense that other people then started taking their clothes off and going and standing in the sunshine. So you never know what your holy audacity is going to bring forward in others. And to finish this story, that was the first night of medicine, I believe. And then the last day when I was leaving, one of the other participants, a male, came up to me and he admitted something to me. He's like, "Hey, you're a really important part of my journey." And he said, "When I first saw you, when we arrived here day one, I had a lot of lust for you." And as the um as the day went on, it was building and building. And then when you ended up going outside and taking your clothes off, I became extremely erotically aroused. And then he had an energetic orgasm that exploded through his whole body, which he had never experienced before. And he said, in that moment, I realized that I have been using the feminine as a vessel for just my pleasure my entire life. And I have been mistreating women in that way. And I will never do that again. And he's like, I was just exploding with love for you. And you show me what the divine feminine is meant to represent. And I will never harm her again. So that's why I had that experience. And when he told me that, I just knew. I was like, I didn't just do that for myself. That was for him and for anyone else who was impacted by being liberated and going outside. So not directly sexual. And I do want us to kind of get into that, kind of if we can start to really usher that way. But I do believe that there's some space for it, right? And this is up to like our medicine carriers, the different people, to help be the shepherds in the space, to know like when it's too much and when to kind of corral people back. not saying that you're too much, but in that container and the consent that we have given to each other in that container and the agreements that are made, there's only certain places that we can go far out. But that's where I think, again, you've created self-attunement, self-awareness. You've now created connection with another person in a sober way, a non-psychedelic, non-expanded state way. Maybe if you are sexual partners, you've explored intimacy, sexual intimacy in sober states, and you might now want to just move into a medicine container, not knowing what may happen. You might have the intention of taking a certain substance and being sensually erotic, or maybe just being with each other. Because remember, intimacy can be just being in the same space, having emotional resonance with each other. So with that, I kind of want to turn it over to you, Ben, and ask, kind of going into the different medicines that people typically use that are good for intimate connection and building, and how they might show up for different uses, like say some for sexual pleasure and others just for like communication.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess I'll just start with what the one we know the most with when it comes to connection, sexual pleasure, MDMA. Right. This is like the couples therapy in a crystal, where uh, unless you get it in a press pill or whatever it is, but it's the substance, it's an empathogen, so it's gonna creates this like energetic vortex between not just the self. It's just like more of a sending the energy out and receiving, right? Sending and receiving. So when with a partner, really enables such a deep connection. And as you said, it can begin with verbal communication, connection, and then lead into more physical, touch. And we talked about in the beginning, like pleasure mapping. So like if we have this all these things done, and we've done all these experiences with ourselves, we can really communicate with our partner at this juncture, like what we are desiring. And MDMA doesn't really allow that, but it enhances that connection, that space. So excuse me, kitty is coming all over me. No pun intended.
Oh, jeez. Oh my. Mm.
um, but yeah, so yeah, MDMA can elicit this state, this like expanded state of like I want to, and really the invitation here is like to communicate that like really what do I like. And um, when we talked about like the container space, things like that, like this is an opportunity to be a professional human being and be preparing yourself for these experiences, right? So with MDMA, it's nice to have things around that can enhance sensation. So like candles for heat, ice for like a temperature sensation, oils, scents, like things that really bring out all the senses that you can connect with all the senses. Using that in conjunction with this medicine can really enhance the experience quite a bit. And then, 2CB is another substance. So, and the reason why 2CB is very similar to MDMA, except it doesn't create the same, um, say like the same physical sensation. Sometimes MDMA can like make things very heavy, make things very stable or still, and 2CB is more psychedelic, so it's going to have a little more energizing, a little more, let's say like less of the skin sensation. I know I'm getting into the nuanced stuff here, but less of the like MDMA like expanded sensation, more of like a psychedelic connection. So yeah, I mean that, and both of those are typically, I would say, typically used in a more sexually expressive way, connected way with partners. Medicines that are used in the same way, but maybe a little less. But actually, it's interesting because our ancestors used mushrooms a lot for sexual connection. They would have these like you know mushroom fueled orgies, essentially, where they would just eat mushrooms and just have experiences um, with people, and a very interesting way. So historically, we could talk that these things are used in that way. LSD, maybe less history because it's a more recent discovery, but that sort of mirrors on ergot, which is maybe the original, one of the original psychedelics that humans had access to, thousands of years ago, and so we're still uncovering how these were used. But in an intimate, connected way, like these can bring again like these expanded, more sensory experience states. But also, again, going back to the conversation we had, working through the projection of the self with these medicines is so very important to come through these with a a very grounded perspective, allowing yourself to have a connection to your no, right? Knowing, and this is part of the preparation where when you go into these medicines with your partner, or if it's in a, say, like a group ceremonial setting, that we have the conversations around like what's safe, what you're saying yes to, and knowing and acknowledging all of these things prior to engaging, and then always knowing that you're able to shift if necessary. And
Well,
so,
I'm gonna inject there real quick. So, from a harm reduction lens, it's highly encouraged that, and this is if you're in any type of altered state. So if you're engaging in sexual energy, you're altered, right? If you add psychedelic, or you're in psychedelics, like you're in an altered state. If you mix those two together, you're in an altered state. So to help reduce harm, potentialities of harm, discover, discuss, and agree upon boundaries before you go into medicine space and blending the two. And when you're in this space, you might be feeling more and more open to certain things. I recommend not going beyond the boundaries that you agreed upon beforehand, because that is
mhm,
going to protect you in the future. That being said, you have total autonomy. If you make that decision to move forward or do something different, maybe that could be the best thing for you. Maybe you were really guarding yourself. But just know that if you're being pressured or coerced in some way, it's so important that you hold on to your no. And this is again why I really encourage people to play with medicine and sexuality from a place of deep familiarity, deep
sure.
trust, deep trust, because
Yeah,
then you're going to be safer there, and you're going to have an amazing experience more than likely.
yeah, and I'll actually
Yeah.
pivot off of what you're saying too in that way. So, um, knowing who you're getting involved with and what you're doing prior to, because um, psychedelics, these medicines especially, will elucidate a faster route to yes, right? And there's this perspective like you shouldn't make choices or big decisions on psychedelics, and I would argue that when the invitation arises, these medicines can allow you to push beyond your normal boundaries, and that's when we talk about pushing beyond the boundaries, that's expansion, right? When you can do things you're not normally doing, or you can have experiences you're not normally used to having, that's expansion. It's expanding your experience. So just going to kind of like use that word interchangeably here, but
Mhm.
enabling yourself, as you're saying, it really brought something up really to the forefront of my mind, is that having a softness around exploration, right? And what you're willing to do. And when you're on substances with your partner or with yourself, um, these can help you say yes more easily within the confines of your limits, right? So I don't want to suggest that we should be using them to because there's always harm in this. I don't want this to be a harm reduction conversation only, but we definitely want to acknowledge these ourselves, that we have to be safe as much as possible. However, when you're with a partner that you trust, that you love, and you allow yourself to go into these states, then consent is okay to be given in an altered state. Because when you go in with deep trust with your partner and they're asking you something or they like to explore something, it's okay to say yes and change your mind. if that's something that you
Yeah.
trust.
We can pull into kind of some BDSM understanding here. So in that community and practitioners and it's becoming more and more common is to talk about hard boundaries and soft boundaries. So I might have a different perspective than Ben here. I believe that if you going into this, having hard boundaries,
Sure.
having them for sure. And I'm not saying I'm just using the terminology. I'm not advocating for people to engage in BDSM and certain acts under the influence of anything. I'm a Shibari practitioner, and my students and people that come in for rope tying, it's no substances at all. Like if you're on caffeine, okay, but nothing else. But when you're in the sexual space, if you have soft boundaries, these are things that you're willing to explore, dance on the edges of, maybe push past. But if you have a hard boundary, that is like when you're sober, you're deeply triggered by it. I highly advise not pushing past that when you're in a psychedelic space.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so with that, there's the 3 A's. There's attunement, there's authenticity, and there's allowance. So if we focus on those 3 things, we're going to have beautiful experiences. And Ben had mentioned having pleasure experiences solo. Maybe that's your first step of being in a pleasure experience with a psychedelic. So you're familiarizing your body and an energy state with what that's like or could be like in different scenarios before you move into a container with someone else. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then we're kind of getting close to the end, but I wanted to wrap up with a few things. And then, of course, I cut you off, Ben. I'm sorry. I was so excited.
You cut me off at the
Uh,
head. I don't
ah!
have a head.
Oh, no, stop. But
You're good.
say you go into a sexual container with someone. Say you don't. Maybe you're just in an intimate conversation and connection with someone. I recommend when you're coming out of the medicine, when you feel like ceremony has concluded, you can do a practice that I taught in the last energetics conclave, which is calling your energy back to yourself and sending anything that's not yours back out. So because you've dissolved some of your edges, right? You've kind of merged with the field around you, the person around you, to really come back into your solitary being, your solitary expression of divine. You need to call your energy back, and you need to vocally express that it go back. Any energy that came into you, go back to the other, and encourage the other person to do the same. And this is going to create separation, which is sexy. We want to merge, but then we also want to separate, and then we want to merge again. And it just keeps us more in ourselves and safe energetically as well. And you can do that with love. And then also thinking about integration. You might have you both, or whoever else is there, are definitely having different experiences, different perspectives, even though you're in the same container. And just know that some people might need a little bit longer to integrate and process whatever they experienced in that ceremony or space of play. And maybe you're just having like a wild pleasure-filled night. Great. There might still need to be some integration or communication, if
Yeah,
you
there you
will,
go. Yeah.
about what has happened. And we don't need to set up a formal integration necessarily, but I'm using that word kind of
Yeah,
loosely
you may
of
be
just,
doing that. People may be doing that naturally, just
yeah. Yeah. So just know that
having
you
that
might want to talk
conversation.
about everything and go really deep into stuff. And like you've come up with all these things, and someone else might just have a different pattern. So again, just encouraging that loving, truthful conversation and patience and recognition that we actually are all a little bit different. And that's what makes it so amazing to be here. If you're in a container, I want to just drop with, there's a couple of practices that I had here, but we're running close to time. So I'm going to pick, we talked about pleasure mapping towards the beginning, but another really beautiful practice is if if you're in a space where you're trying to build an intimate connection, one of the best ways to do that is eye gazing. And with eye gazing, you typically want to look at the left eye. Some people bounce back and forth, but typically it said the left eye is like the portal to your soul. and looking through that eye and maintaining gaze without thought and just allowing sensation. And if things arrive in your mind that are thoughts, like allow them to be there, but then usher them away as quickly as possible. You can do this under medicine as well. It can be really powerful and help expand your collective field and connection with each other even more. And this is a really cool time to attune to someone. So if you feel like your relationship is a little bit wonky, you can do some eye gazing before you even go like ingest the sacrament and the medicine. And that's going to bring you into an aligned frequency. And then you're probably going to have a much better uniformed experience together. So I'll just end my portion of talking about this topic now. So anything you want to share, Ben?
Yeah, eye gazing. Yes, it's very important practice. I think I probably talked several times about it, and really, really such a beautiful, simple experience that you can share with one another. You can start with yourself. You can do this in the mirror, right? Give yourself that space, give yourself that awareness and that acknowledgement, and then with your partner, soften. It just creates softness. And it's interesting. Because what it can offer is really a way to connect without words. And sometimes words want to come through, and they're going to come through the filter, right? Like energies rise up through the chakras, and wherever you may have resistance is where the energy can project from. So when we get to this highest state, which is like expanded awareness, we can just be in connection without having to verbalize it. And so when we can do that and really spend time doing that, it really does enable a such a deeper somatic connection, somatic experience, right? This is, I think it's like really important to always remember that the experience that that I most desire personally, it's all in the body. Reminding that the body is this like system of processes, which it also that is part of the mind, but the body encapsulates everything. So bringing everything back in here and deciding how we want to work with it and what the experience wants to be like. So I'd love to, yeah, I really love to eye gaze, and and
We love it. We love eye
yeah,
gazing.
I think that's really what started to catalyze this like deeper transformation and connection that we share. And so I think that's so important. If you have that opportunity, or even if you don't think you have the opportunity, you can invite that in, right? Because it's not like you have to do anything. It's actually you do less, and then get
Yeah,
more,
yeah, and it might feel
right?
awkward at first. Yeah, I mean, eye gazing is a very common practice because it's so effective. You just know it might be awkward and you might get the giggles or something, but stick with it and keep breathing. And if you're attuned to the person sitting across from you, you'll start to see whenever they're feeling a little discomfort or they might be in their heads. And just with your eyes and your energy can call them back into presence. And that's going to serve you a lot when you go into a psychedelic experience, because in psychedelics you are feeling the energy of the other very, 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 very strong. And again, you can still hold on to discernment of like what is mine, what is theirs, and then kind of guide the experience if you feel called to into a direction that is really serving for like love, devotion, wild experience, whatever it might be. Yeah. Well, I want to talk about this topic
Thank
a
you.
lot more. I want to go very deep into some nuanced subjects and plan to do so moving forward. So we would love, love, love you all's feedback on this share. What you would love to hear more of. If you want to share your personal experience, we have a feedback form that is going to be in the notes beneath this video.
Hmm.
It's just called a feedback form, or you can email us at info@thesacredsynthesis. But would love to hear about it. And just some fun announcements. This Sunday, we are having a Jaguar Light Wand ceremony. You are invited to attend, whether you want to work with the sacrament or not. That is virtual. And then we also have a few seats left in person. You all can find that information at thesacredsynthesis.com. Go to events, and then you'll see the light wand ceremony under the events tab. And then next week's conclave is the ceremony conclave, where we were going to be talking about the power of the altar. One
Mm,
of our initial conclaves was all about building self-ceremony, and we're going to start breaking down those components of ceremony, and the first one being the altar and why it's can be really significant and powerful to your journeys. Yeah.
yeah, really excited about that and getting into some of those different aspects of what we have on our altar and all the different fun topics contained therein. So
Yeah.
yeah, thank you.
Amazing. Yeah. Thanks everyone for being here. We love you and are so honored that you tuned in today. Till next time.
Thank you.